The copper boom really led to Eagle Harbor becoming established, and with that, because there were no good roads up to this area, shipping was the primary way that they got supplies and people in and out. So when you have shipping on Lake Superior, known for its ferocious waves, bad weather, and you have the early mid-1800s, you're going to find that the sailors needed help to navigate the peninsula. So the government established our first Eagle Harbor Lighthouse in 1851, and that was built where our current one is. It didn't last too long because it was built of stone and wood tower, and so in 1871 we had a new one built, made of brick, thick walls, wonderful tower, which is now over 150 years old. So this particular lighthouse is both a dwelling with a tower attached. So we had a keeper's family, and some of them were quite large, and lived right there where the keeper was working. And we've had 22 lighthouse keepers and their families live here. Through the years, I think in particular the early years when there wasn't electricity, they had a lot of work to keep that lantern burning from sunset to sunrise. But also then once they shut the light off for the day, they were really busy keeping everything clean. You had a lot of smoke to keep the lens clean, you had to keep the windows clean. There was a lot of maintenance done, and I think the whole family probably got involved. What I saw when we started to look at all the different keepers, they were at first part of the U.S. Lighthouse Service, and then later that merged into the U.S. Coast Guard. So they've always had government affiliations. And what happened is a lot of times it seems like they hired for keepers men that used to be in the war. In fact, we highlight Peter Bird, who was injured in the Civil War, and we have information about his life. When they found that there was so much traffic on the lakes and the light itself during fog and storm wouldn't be effective enough to send out its beams, they did establish in 1895 a fog signal building. And then it changed a little bit here with the keeper because he got assistants. So he had 1 or 2 assistants. So what that meant is that they would do a 24-hour duty, 8 hours on, so they were always watching the weather, and they would have to get ready to get that fog signal going, and it took a while to get it so it would make the signal. We also know that many of our keepers, when they were younger, were stationed on islands. Our keepers really liked being here, in particular with families. There was a church, school, there were stores, there was a community.
So as many people know, the Keweenaw Peninsula is fraught with a lot of shipwrecks, present and past. One notable was the city of Bangor, but there are many others. And the reason for that is the geography of this coastline in relationship to the lake. The lighthouse was actually spawned from a economic need that was drawn by the lumber and mining industry. But the existence of the lighthouse really is predicated by the fact that we have all this basalt rock that runs from the surface of the lake underneath the lake. So it's pretty treacherous around the Keweenaw Peninsula. So when we look out on the lake, we see a bellbuoy here, and that signifies to mariners and boaters that there is one safe method in and out of the harbor. And that is through the cribs that you can see right over here. and that serves as the entrance to our harbor. And at the rear of the harbor, you would see a beach-like area where we have our range lights. There's a forward range and a rear range. Boaters have to line their boats up through the crib and aligned with that range light in order to safely enter our harbor. The actual lighthouse serves as a beacon for mariners out on the lake. Our large freighters have pretty advanced GPS systems right now, so they can really tell within an inch on the globe where they're at. But pleasure boaters would rely on our lighthouse to let them know the dangers that exist, the entrance to the harbor, and actually where they are on the lake.
When we started out in 1851, they had Lewis lamps, which weren't very effective. And so once Fresnel invented the lens using prisms and physics to send a beamway out, it revolutionized the whole technology of lighthouses.
It is currently a working light. It has changed radically through the eras. A long, long time ago, you did not have the navigational systems we have today. At that time, you always went by visuals. We've had Fresnel lenses that were invented in 1795, which eventually used kerosene, which eventually became electrified. Then we had the aviation beacons, and then we have this newer system that's very tiny, but shoots way out into the lake. So when you would look this way, you would see by the color of the lights, you knew which lighthouse it was.
They do call them light characteristics because they're different in terms of the colors and in terms of the pattern. So it's green for Copper Harbor. Our operating beacon is a red and white flash every 10 seconds.
But they then in turn decided it would be more visible if we painted the tower white, because this has always been red brick. And so since then it has continued to be done that way.
We have a 4th order Fresnel lens, and that was pretty typical to be used for this size and location of a lighthouse. So if you come across a 1st order Fresnel lens, it would be very large, and that would be more like on your oceans. But for Lake Michigan, typically I think it was 3rd, 4th, and 5th order lenses that are more likely to be. The one we have on display here, we're really happy to have it on loan. This one is very similar model to what we had. And that stayed from in the 1850s to the 1960s up in our lantern room. In 1982, the last keeper left. So the Keweenaw County Historical Society was leased this property, and we opened it up for the public in 1983. In 1999, the government actually transferred ownership over to us. Other than the top of the lantern room, where now the marine rotating beacon rotates our signal out, is still part of the Coast Guard. So we've been really going a long time having this open as a museum and a public place. I think especially the recreational boaters, when they come out of the fog and they start to see that red and white flash, they're probably feeling, yes, I've made it back to the harbor.
My name is Ann Newton. I grew up in Calumet, and I now live in Massachusetts, but I come up here just about every summer as much as possible.
My name is Kathy Riley. Live in Wisconsin right now, but grew up in Calumet. Came to Eagle Harbor every summer of my life. Our grandparents lived here. They built their cottage. We've been coming here, and Ann's been here a lot longer.
I'm Susan Reagan. I've always come to Eagle Harbor my entire life. Why? Because my family basically was here. My great uncle, Hans Robinson, was the lighthouse keeper here in Eagle Harbor.
As a small child, my father was overseas with World War II, but my mother would take us down here with my grandparents. So we have pictures of me as an infant in a tub in the backyard of the original cottage.
We worked every summer. Ann worked at the Lake Breeze. I worked at what's now the Fletchy's Otter Belly. I worked up at the Eagle Harbor Inn. There was a dock right off the beach. That was an L-shaped dock. And growing up, we used to have a lot of fun on that. We'd have initiations. We'd throw newcomers into the lake. But yeah, there are a lot of good memories.
This is the Keweenaw History Museum. We're trying to tell the story not just of the lighthouse. This is a beautiful place to come in and see all the other things that you can learn about for Keweenaw County, because it's a shared history. People really trust us with their artifacts, that we'll display them, that we'll honor them, that we will give credence to their story, because everybody that's got history up here has a different story to tell.
So the first time I was ever in this lighthouse was in 2009. And we had an open house and everybody was dressed in costumes. And I looked through it and I remember my great uncle back when I was a child. Every day he'd get up, he was retired now, he'd get up, he had three-piece suit on all the time. He would wind the clock exactly at the same time every day, and he was kind of on a schedule, like when you're in the military, you do these things at these times. He originally joined the Lighthouse service, but at that time it was called the Lighthouse Establishment in 1900. His duty stations were all over the map, but mostly Lake Superior. This was his last station to be at. That was from 1927 to 1940. My maternal grandmother died when my mother was 6 years old. So the reason my mother and her two sisters spent a great deal of time here in the lighthouse was that Hans Robinson was her uncle, and his wife Ida was her aunt. And that's who raised them. I have been in this lighthouse since 2009, and sometimes you feel like you should just move in.
my father, who grew up here, came here as a kid also. And he was about 15 when the city of Bangor had to unload all these cars.
The city of Bangor crashed in November of 1926, carrying a load of these brand new Chryslers from Detroit to Duluth to a dealership. I think they were down near Munising. It looked like really good weather. They were going to come up the east side of the peninsula, and the weather started getting sketchy. They thought they were going to turn around and harbor in Bay de Gris. The problem was they really didn't know where they were going. They got grounded. They have to abandon ship. They walked the shore and they didn't know where they were going. A life-saving ship from this station was going up to go to another rescue that was over by the Bay de Gris side of the peninsula. And they were bringing the survivors of the ship, of the other ship that wrecked. They saw these guys on the shore going, "We'll be back to get you." And then they brought them to Copper Harbor. They spent the winter in Copper Harbor.
The ship froze and the cars were freezing on the ship. So they had to get them off before they all went into the lake.
The problem was, at that point, there was no roads to Copper Harbor. You know, that just wasn't a road that you could drive on. They had to bring in a great big huge snowblower from St. Paul on a train and then blow the road open because there were huge 10-foot drifts or so.
They built the sides up on the ice ramp. And they get in and they say, "Just go straight ahead." So, like a toboggan run.
Right. And then once they got all the cars off the ship, they could drive them to Calumet, hop them on a train, take them back to Detroit to get refurbished and sent back out before the cars weren't worth anything anymore.
How exactly did they convince your father to?
Oh, it didn't take much.
You get the day off of school, so let's go.
It wrecked in 26, they took the cars off in 27. Then they salvaged it, they cut it up for salvage in the 40s, but there's still pieces of metal floating up on the shore between Horseshoe Harbor and High Rock. We have, from the city of Bangor, we have Captain Mackin's coat. Someone donated a car, and we've driven it in parades. We have the logbook. It was up in the woods. They took it off the ship and it was up in the woods and somebody found it. Amazingly enough, the last page where they grounded is not in the book. Oops.
I'm sure he loved it. It was an adventure at that time, too. And everybody joined in. I mean, you know, you're up in the copper country and people just do. If you need it, do it.
Tell me why you think it's important that there are places like this to document these stories.
Well, because it's a family place. And people help each other up here. When I was flying up here this year, some lady said, "It's the best place to grow old because you have family here that will help you." And that's the thing about this place. Even if you're not related, you're a family.
Is there anything else that you just wanted to talk about at all? Any other
No.
stories around the harbor to tell?
Ooh,
No,
we're not
we
allowed
can't
to.
reveal it.
The Keweenaw County Historical Society has approximately 1,000 members all over the country. We have 8 sites, 12 museums, and 24 buildings that we're responsible for.
We're really proud that people come all over to visit us, and we need people because we need them as volunteers, we need them as ambassadors, and then we also need entities like the Keweenaw Historic National Park and their technical assistance. We're proud that we have it open from mid-June to the beginning of October. We want you to come here to Eagle Harbor to learn about those keepers. When you visit our lighthouse, you can actually feel like maybe you were with that keeper and his family.
There's always something to be done. We want it to look great, first of all. Being that we're self-guided now, we have much more signage than we used to have. We have some wonderful people that are great with displays, great with recreating, great with fixing things.
I got involved when Karen didn't have anyone to set up displays. And I did the bedrooms upstairs and then gradually have worked down, and then we were at the point where the kitchen needed to be redone. We had asbestos tile and it was falling apart. We had rugs trying to cover it. So we did end up having to have it abated. Then we started looking for what could have been in here. We were trying to hit the 20s and 30s time period. Almost everything has been donated. The icebox was donated. The stove came out of my house. It was in storage for quite a few years. We found the sink and the cabinet in the fishing museum in the basement. The linoleum that's actually in the pantry, we found that in here, and that kind of gave us an idea for colors. The brand Armstrong put out a book of the patterns they had in 1939. That pattern's in there. So and at the very bottom of it, it gave suggestions for colors. We did quite a bit of research trying to find out like when water and electricity came here, and one of the things we found is that nothing to operate any of the equipment required electricity. Across what's now the Life Saving Museum, they had electricity. They needed it for some of their equipment, we did not.
Remind me, how long have you been working here at the Lighthouse?
Oh, probably 25 years. But of course, I came up here all the time as a kid. I mean, this was a wonderful magnet to come up and look it over and run around a little bit. And the young people are still doing that, and that's great. I'm kind of passing my jobs on right now, and that's okay. There's other people that are coming in that'll take care of it.
We all want to leave a legacy for the next generations. And the way we do that is making sure we can interpret what we have and encourage other people to keep making donations, because Keweenaw is more than the lighthouse. And it's more than Eagle Harbor. After time, there won't be people to tell the story. So if people come in and learn about these things, they can pass the story on. It's not what you read about in a book. It's Kathy and Ann talking about their father driving a car off the ship. It's Susan having the mother that was in the lighthouse. It's everybody with their connections, the personal stories that we're hoping to share.